All right, let's start. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming on a busy Saturday. Welcome to the second seminar in our Elite Prep College Seminar Series. This one is called Making Your College Applications Exceptional. And judging from the number of you that are participating in this webinar, this question, I think, is heavy on many people's minds. Hopefully, this seminar will help you to kind of get your questions answered. I will try to answer as many questions as possible today. But before we do, let me just introduce myself briefly. My name is Henry Kim. I've been with Elite for over 30 years now as a teacher and a director. I actually started as a student at Elite over 30 years ago when I was in high school before attending UCLA. Over the years, I've worked with thousands of students and had the privilege of working with some of the most amazing individuals. The drive and determination of some of the students I've worked with have always really amazed me and has really inspired me to do as much as I can to help them on their journey. I know in these times, especially these times, there are a lot of uncertainty about college admissions. I hope today's session, whether you're a parent or a student, will leave you more informed and confident about what's ahead. Just a couple of technical notes about this webinar. One thing is I can see you, I mean, you can see me, but I cannot see you or hear you. So you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, but I won't be able to get to your questions until the end of the presentation, which will be about 45 minutes long today. I will do my best to leave a couple of minutes at the end to answer all of your questions, so please be patient. Also, I know there's a lot of questions about UCs going test optional, and I'm sure you are a little bit confused about what that means. What does it mean for your students? I will make an effort to answer all of these questions at the end of the presentation. So please, after the presentation ends, please stick around. And also your live Q&A questions you guys are posting right now, I will make the best effort to answer as many of them as possible. However, if your question is not answered, because our time is a little limited today, please don't worry. You can contact one of our local Elite branches, and the branch directors or one of the counselors will be happy to answer your questions. With that, let's get started. All right. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so today's presentation is called Making Your College Applications Exceptional. I know it's a very bold title, right? So I hope this presentation lives up to it. Lives up to it. I hope there aren't any technical difficulties. Like I said, my name is Henry. Let me just jump right into this. So what are the components of a college application? So the components that makes up a college application is very, very simple. There is the GPA, and most colleges look at both weighted and unweighted GPA. There are the standardized exams. We're talking about your SATs, your ACTs, your SAT subject scores, your AP scores, your extracurricular activities, things you do outside of schoolwork, whether it's clubs, whether it's sports, whether it's research, including honors and awards. Part of a club, but are you a member? Are you the president? These have a profound effect on the effectiveness of your overall application. Letters of recommendation. Now, some colleges do not allow letters of rec. For example, UCs do not have a system in which letters of recommendation could be sent. But a lot of the private schools do. And there are different types of letters of recommendation. There's letters of recommendations from your teachers, and there's letters of recommendation that comes out from outside sources. So other importance of extracurricular activities is that it can be an invaluable source for these outside letters of recommendations. And there are the personal statements. So the personal statements will allow you to take everything that you've done and kind of, craft them in such a way that gives them a best ideal as to who you are. So these are obviously very, very important. But overall, other than exceptions, like if you're being recruited by, through sports, or if you're, let's say, a quadruple legacy, or if your parents have donated like $50 million to a university or something like that, these are the 5 major components to a college application. Now, so, okay, so these are the 5 things. So what does that mean? So how do they evaluate these 5 components? So depending on who are applying, these components have different importance. So when you are applying to a Cal State University, a CSU, GPA and exam scores account for almost 100% of the evaluation. So CSU applications, if you've never seen them, there are no essays, there's no letters of recommendations, they don't even ask for activities. So there's no place on your Cal State application to put what your activities are. There's a space in the CSU application that asks, how many hours a week do you spend on your activities? You can put 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 11 to 15. And based upon what you put, they will assign a score, and then they will take that in your overall evaluation. But there's no place. So basically that means for CSUs, the evaluation is almost 100% based on GPA and exam scores. As far as UCs are concerned, now when you look at downs, I make these up. So these aren't from UCs, they're not from universities. So over the years, I've come to kind of, realize the importance of these things are a little bit different from school to school. And many parents over the years have asked me, okay, what percent is the GPA worth when you're applying to UCs? What is it worth when you're applying to, let's say, Dartmouth? And just to kind of satisfy those type of questions, I came up with a rubric, if you will. And even within the UCs, obviously these breakdowns are different from different UCs to UCs, where at UC Riverside, GPA and exam scores might be worth a lot more than it is at UCLA. But overall, this is kind of the average that you're looking for. When you're looking at competitive private schools, I would say exam scores and your extracurriculars, letters of rec, and essays are worth about the same. When you're looking at top 10 schools, like Harvard, Stanford, where a lot of you guys dream of going, I would say that activities, your letters of recommendations and essays outweigh your GPA and exam scores. I hope that kind of makes sense. So just to look at a common, so I think many of you guys want to go to UCLA, UC Berkeley. So I want to show you what the 2019 data looks like from UCLA. So let's just look at this very quickly. In 2019, UCLA received 111 applications. That number, I don't know if you realize, it is extremely, is incredibly a lot. Okay, so over 100,000 applications, 13,720 applicants were admitted for an admission rate of 12%. And these were the academic data for students who were admitted. Average weighted GPA, unweighted GPA of students who were admitted was 3.96. Average weighted GPA was 4.51. The average SAT score was 1455. Average ATC score was 33. The daunting numbers is that about 25% of the applicants that applied had numbers that you're staring at right now, but the admission rate was only 12%. So for schools like UCLA, Berkeley, they mimic more the top private colleges than they do regular public universities. So having strong GPA, having a strong exam score are almost considered to be the norm. So for schools like these, your activities do have a huge impact on your chance of getting into these schools. So I wanted to show you a contrasting example of 2 students. So I work with a lot of students, and these 2 examples really stood out to me this year because they were so different. So let's take a look at them, right? So contrasting examples, this is student number 1. So she's an Asian female student. She's a bio major. She wants to be, I think she wanted to be a doctor. She had a perfect unweighted GPA, 4.0, 4.5 weighted, 50 on her SATs. She had, I think, 800 on math level 2, 800 on chemistry, over 8 AP scores of 5s. So academically, she was perfect. She was perfect. She was accepted by UC Irvine, UC San Diego, and UCLA. but she was waitlisted at UC Berkeley. So her weakness was that her extracurricular activities and her personal statements were fairly average. Because of her lack of activities, her personal statements didn't really have the necessary passion or direction, if you will, right? Now, by contrast, this student really surprised me. So this student was, I think, my biggest surprise this year. Asian male, bio major as well, had a 3.5 unweighted GPA. He had 2 C's in his junior year. 3.8 unweighted GPA, 1420 on the SATs. Was rejected by UC Santa Cruz, UC Irvine, UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, and UCLA. But surprisingly, he was accepted into UC Riverside and UC Berkeley. So he texted me saying, Henry, I think Berkeley made some sort of an error. I got in. And it was a pleasant surprise. So why? Because the previous student was so much more accomplished when it came to her academics, but she was waitlisted at Berkeley, but this student was accepted, right? So the previous student showed more, I would say, stability. So she got into more UCs, but she ultimately got rejected from the one that she really, really wanted to go to, which was Berkeley. This student had extra strong and very, I will put it as pointed extracurriculars. And because of that, he was able to formulate his personal statements in a very passionate fashion. So, what did he do, right? What was his thing? So he's a bio major member, right? So did he do a lot of research? Did he save people? Did he come up with a new, medication? What did he do? It was none of those. So he was dedicated to a culture dance studio where he was dancing with the studio, doing culture dance for the last 10 years. He taught dance classes there. He actually traveled with the dance company to perform. So he went to Australia, he was in Berlin. He went to 5-6 different other nations to perform with this dance company. He competed in competitions. He started a club in his high school to share and to teach this unique form of dance. Through all of this, he came to gain an understanding and an appreciation of his cultural background. And that became the centerpiece of his personal statement. And when you look back, what is the reason why a perfect GPA student would not get into Berkeley, but he would? Somebody at Berkeley found his life, right? His passion to be something worthwhile, something to invest in, right? So it was very surprising. So he was also admitted to USC, which was another extreme surprise, right? So what to take from this? What to take from this is, instead of doing activities just from a perspective of, what's going to help me with college applications, this student didn't do that, right? He basically pursued something that he loved, and he pursued it to a point where he dedicated majority of his time to this one single thing. And that turned out to be very, very positive for him. So the importance of extracurricular activities, they point to maturity, creativity, passion. And passion is very, it's one of those key words among admission officers. I think it's unfair, but a lot of colleges basically want 17, 16-year-olds, trapped in, like a 25-year-old's, mind, right? So they want people that are mature, right? So asking like a 17-year-old, what are you passionate about? Sometimes it's an unfair question, but at the same time, if you have goals, if you have, desires of going into some of these more competitive colleges, it's something that they're looking for. And it will these activities lead to outside recommendation letters, right? So in cases outside of the UCs, the outside rec letters are as important, if not more important, than your teacher recommendation letters, right? So when you go to your AP chemistry teacher and ask for a letter recommendation, you are not the only person that they're writing this letter recommendation for. Most likely they're writing a letter rec for 20, 30, maybe 50 students, and they tend to be in many ways very similar. Whereas if you went to like a summer program, if you're in a lab and a professor, a PI is willing to write your letter of recommendation, those letters of rec tends to be way more personal, and they can have more of an impact. And when you're doing these extracurriculars, not being certain of what you're passionate about should not be an excuse, right? So even though you might not be 100% sure about what you want to do, and if you are waiting for this weird heavenly moment where the skies open up and God speaks to you like, oh, Henry, you need to do this, that might never come, right? You can speak to your parents, they're in their 40s or in their 50s, and if you ask them, did that moment ever come for you, a lot of them will say no, right? So not being certain is not an excuse of being inactive, right? Be active. Your activities do not necessarily have to align with your major. As you saw with the previous student, cultural dance has nothing to do with biology, right? But it turned out to be effective for him. And what you're going to be writing about. So it's very, very, very important. So you need to be active in your extracurriculars, obviously. All right, so with that said, I wanted to introduce a couple of other examples, right? So this is going to be two kind of contrasting examples. The first student is a student that's very passionate about her activities, and the second student was somewhat, lackadaisical, right? So what happened to both of them, right? So the first student, she is an Asian male, as you can see by that wonderful picture next to the slide, right? She's pre-med. She has near perfect academics. She had a 4.0 in her GPA, but her SATs and ACTs were not honestly perfect. They were good, but they were not near perfect. She was inspired at a young age to become a doctor, to do research and to help the underprivileged. She told me that when she was in 7th grade, she somehow got to volunteer at a Special Olympics, and seeing these kids, with disabilities, just trying their best, really inspired her. So through that inspiration, she realized this is what she wanted to do for the rest of her life. So because she was inspired early and she knew very early on what she wanted to do, she became this fireball. She became very active. She did not sit back. She participated, and she was a driving force of a lot of the different things that happened at her school that actually addressed the need of the underprivileged and some part of the student body that was always ignored. So she held numerous leadership positions. She was the school's ASB president in her senior year. She volunteered at numerous community-based activities, not just the school ones. So outside of school, through the city hall, through Red Cross, through Special Olympics. So not just math club at school, not just key club at school. She went beyond that, outside of her immediate environment. She started a program that addressed the need of mentally challenged students at her school. She was very adamant that at her school, when in her junior year, when she was one of the coordinators, they had two different homecomings. So they had homecoming for the regular school, the regular student body, and they had homecoming for students who were mentally challenged. So she decided that's not good, right? So they were held separately in hopes that this was the best thing for both types of students, but she realized that's not right. So she integrated the both homecomings to include the mentally challenged students and to highlight them and not to ignore them, right? So that's one of the things that she's most proud of. Oops, what happened here? Sorry about that. Oops, sorry. My bad, sorry. Okay, there you go. Okay, sorry about that, okay. And then through all of the things that she's done, she was able to attend SSP. SSP stands for Summer Science Program. It's one of the most difficult programs to get into during the summer. And she was able to do research through SSP during the summer in biochemistry at UC San Diego this summer. Through that, she got this amazing letter of recommendation from one of the professors there. She also participated in a TED Talk, right? So I asked her, like, how in the world did you, get that opportunity? And she said there was this thing at, not through her school, but through her community. And she aggressively pursued it. And she was able to give this TED Talk, bridging medicine and the humanities. And, through all of her work, through City Hall, community-based internships and volunteer work, and through her school, she was able to get, string of really strong outside recommendation letters speaking on her behalf. And this year, she was admitted early to Yale. So she's ecstatic about going to Yale. That's where she's been wanting to go for her entire life. And she found success there. And I'm really, really happy for her. Now, the second student that I had is kind of when you look at them side by side, sometimes it's hard to see the difference, but there is a difference, right? So let's look at the second student. So she's Asian as well. She's pre-med. I wanted to make sure that we compare apples to apples, not an Asian male student who's an engineering major versus an Asian female student who's like a poetry major. That sometimes wouldn't be a fair comparison. This student had perfect academics, 4.0, 4.6 weighted, 1570 on her SATs, just numerous fives on her APs and whatnot. She was a part of speech and debate. She was a treasurer in her senior year. She played the viola for an outside orchestra. She was third chair, I believe. She volunteered at her local hospital. Now, she started volunteering in the middle of her junior year. So after we started meeting, I was like, if you want to be a doctor, I mean, don't you need to be inside a hospital, right? And she's like, oh, okay, I guess. So she started in the middle of her junior year. She participated in several different clubs in school. I think she was in math clubs, science Olympiad, and things like that, right? Researched at UC San-Diego during the summer after her junior year. She emailed a whole bunch of professors, right? She was admitted to UCLA, but she was waitlisted at Berkeley and rejected from most of her top private choices. Now, this is not the same student that we saw before. It's a different student. And, so when these type of things happen, sometimes I get students asking me, what happened? What went wrong? From the beginning with this student, she really wanted to go to Stanford and she applied early to Stanford. I really wanted her to apply early decision to a lesser school because I thought her overall resume was not strong enough, right? So what are the differences, right? So what are the differences from the first student to the second? It's a question of focus and dedication. The first student was just laser focused, right? And inner determination in pursuing her passions. The second student was almost non-committal, starting her hospital volunteer work in the middle of her junior year, right? And, a lot of the times that directly affects the quality of their personal statements, where the first student was convincingly able to write personal statements, saying, this is my passion, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And her resume backed that up. Therefore, her statements become believable. Now, if the second student did the same thing with her activities, not backing that particular statement up, it almost looks made up, if you will. And you need to understand, admission officers are not dense. I get questions a lot of the times, and and sometimes I'm like, oh, what do you mean? So I'll get, like statements from parents like, if he works at, let's say, Baskin Robbins this summer, wants to be a business major, would that make a difference? I mean, I think in many ways, not that working is not a good thing, but if you're thinking that's going to make an overall difference where you work for a couple of weeks or a couple of months right before your applications are due, and make a true difference in your overall applications, you're not giving the admission officers who are reading your applications enough credit. They will see through it. They can recognize a student who is truly dedicated versus a student who is not. So, what can you do? That's all great, but what can I do? So, what happens if you're not sure? Like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm passionate about. I don't know exactly what I love, right? So how am I supposed to create a resume like hers and help myself stand out? This is by far the most common question that I get, right? So a lot of the times I do consulting and then I sit down with the students and they'll say, I want to go here. And I'm like, wow, you're going to need a stronger resume. What do you want to do with your life? And they look at me like, I don't know. And I'll say, what are your dreams? And they'll tell me, my dreams are to get at school. That's my dream. That's as far as my dream goes. And it's problematic, right? Because that's not going to be effective. So seek guidance. Either counselors, talk to classmates that are older than you, that have seen success. Use a template if you have to, right? Learn from those who came before you. So I want to show you something that happened this year that was really, really eye-opening, at least for the students and parents. So I had a student 2 years ago that got into MIT for astrophysics, right? And his resume was amazing. So I got a student this year who wanted to study astrophysics as well, but his resume was nowhere near as strong. So we did something about it. So let's look at this, okay? So let's look at an example where one student learned from the experience of another. So this is example 3. So as you can see by the picture, this is a male student, right? It's an Asian male. As you can see, I work with a lot of Asian students, right? So I'm in San Diego. So astrophysics major, perfect academics, and this is another thing that I want to bring up. For those of you who want to get into competitive schools, having a really high weighted GPA is great, but having a 4.0 is way more effective. So I would really advise you that if you want to be, let's say, a STEM major, right, stay away from classes that are unnecessary. Classes like AP World History, AP Euro, where it can be a potential B that can actually affect your overall GPA, right? Perfect academics, this student had really good SATs, SAT subjects, so academically he was really flawless. He competed in the U.S. Astrophysics and astronomy competitions. He was actually chosen as one of their international competitors, right? So they only choose like 20 of these students out of the entire country. So he did well. He also participated in the USA Physics Olympiad. He won several science competitions. So this was before Siemens was canceled. He was a Siemens semifinalist. He won the California Science and Engineering Fair. He did independent astronomy research. But the thing that really caught my eye when I looked over his resume was that he actually, starting from 9th grade, started aggressively emailing professors all across the country, from University of Arizona to University of Hawaii to University of Texas to universities in Thailand, asking if you can do internships in observatories. So starting in the summer after his 9th grade, every summer he's gone for a month, 2 months, and he's not doing, other than the last summer where he had to go to the IOAA, camp for astrophysics, he was all over the place, right? So he was all over the place, just looking at the stars, and that's what he wants to do for a living. And he did numerous volunteer work in the field of astronomy and physics. So this is another student who realized very early what he wanted to do and took aggressive action. And he's currently a 3rd year at MIT. So this is a student I got this year who wanted to do astrophysics with physics. So he's going to the school that he's going to be going to this year as a physics major. So he's an Asian male, physics major, near perfect, but not exactly 100% perfect. Until the end of his junior year, he was active in standard activities with, moderate success. He was in Science Olympiad, but, it was regional, not national. He attended Cosmos in his, end of his 10th grade, summer from 10th to 11th grade summer. Did some research, math club, physics club, music. He really wanted to go to Princeton, So we started figuring like, your activities are not anywhere near strong enough for these Ivy League schools. So we decided to follow the previous students' example and started emailing every single astronomical observatories in the entire world, right? So I think he sent out close to about 150 emails. And he was able to get an internship with Professor Apai, right? So Professor Apai is in charge of a program called Eden. Eden is an astronomy effort to identify exoplanets. They use 12 telescopes basically strewn across the planet, and they're trying to look for planets. So he was able to do this internship with this professor as the only high school student in their effort. And it led to a research paper, and Dr. Pai was gracious enough to write him a strong letter of recommendation. And that thing that he did during the summer became the focus of his entire personal statement. From there, he was admitted to Yale this year. Unfortunately, he did not get into Princeton early. He was really mad, but I told him to be so. But he got into Yale through regular admissions. So Yale was his second choice. So it turned out very, very well for him. So the importance of personal statements. It's not enough passionate about how you spend your time. It's also very important that you paint a clear picture, right? So here's an example of what I'm talking about. So a while ago, I had a student who wanted to be a doctor. And so, he started working on his personal statements. And the first draft that he brought in was all about him being the president of his culinary club, right? And I was like, okay, that's all great, but you want to be pre-med? And I was looking through his resume, and he had volunteered over 400 hours at 2 different hospitals. And so I asked him, like, why in the world you spend 4 years just jumping around different departments at 2 different hospitals and not write about how to increase your chances? Choose a major. So you cannot choose this early enough, because this will direct your activities, right? Choose a major, create a college list. So it's not early. It's not early. If you're in 9th grade, choose a college list. You can visit as many of them as you can. Decide whether early action, early decision is an option. And if you do, you can target a particular school. So if you choose a major, like I want to be, let's say, I want to be a computer science major, and then this is my college, these are the schools with this, and you start visiting and you go, I love Duke. Duke is where I really, really want to go. Then you can start looking at what Duke is looking for and start, tailoring your activities towards that if you can. Decide whether specialized programs are an option, like BSMD programs or 5-year pharmacology programs, or you want to go into like a shrunken law plus, let's say, MBA program, whatever the cases might be. Create a calendar. So a lot of you guys create 4-year academic calendars, right? So as you enter 9th grade, you go, these are the classes I'm going to take for the next 4 years. Well, you can create an extracurricular calendar too. Ignore that aspect of it. Utilize your summers. And, a lot of you guys are so busy with schoolwork. The free time that you have typically comes during your summer. Utilize them wisely. Just as a piece of information, many summer activities, ones that are worth going to, their applications occur in winter. Okay, so if you're like in March, April, okay, oh man, what am I going to do for summer? It's too late. You need to start thinking about them during Christmas. Plan ahead. Who's going to write your letter of recommendation? When am I going to travel? When am I going to see? Am I going to research? If I'm going to do research, am I going to publish? Is that publication going to come before my college applications are due? Right? Things like that. You need to plan way ahead and look over the applications. Do you know what's in the common application? Do you know what's in the UC applications? They're not just available for rising seniors. They're available for viewing for anyone. So start looking at them. What do I need to do here? So if you start looking, for example, I'm using these kind of difficult colleges. I don't want this presentation to only be about like, you know, Harvard and things like that. But overall, if you look at schools like, let's say, Caltech and MIT, these two schools are one of the few that ask for your AMC scores, if you know what that is, right? So they want to know if you've been competing in like, you know, American math competition, what was your AMC 10 score? What was your AMC, you know, 12 score? So to Caltech and MIT, those scores matter, right? So you should look them over. If you apply to UCs, there's no place to put that stuff, right? If you apply to Yale, they don't want it, right? But there are certain schools that want it. So you should be looking over the applications. Start. Or now, I'd say this with some caution. When I say earlier the better, I'm talking about like 9th grade, not in 5th grade, right? But yeah, I mean, earlier the better. Ideally, before 9th grade begins, you know, create a plan, right? And then how do I know what I will excel in or enjoy if you start, you know, planning so early? Well, just because you start planning doesn't mean that you can't change your mind, right? So take a risk. Don't be afraid to act. I don't know how many juniors I've met when I start kind of grilling them about how come you haven't been so active? And their excuse always is, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Therefore, I did nothing. Well, that's not good, right? So don't be afraid to act, right? Take a risk. You know, I don't know if I want to do this, but I'm kind of interested in it. Maybe this is what I want to do. And begin as quickly as possible. And then let's say you are a current junior right now. Like, am I doomed? No, there's still time. It's not too late. Okay, so even now, and for those of you who haven't acted, this virus that's just kind of, you know, shutting everything down might actually turn out to be a benefit for you, right? So I will go into that in a bit, but it's never too late, right? Now, is there help out there? So, wow, I just heard this 40-minute, you know, kind of presentation, and it's all great, but how am I supposed to navigate through all of this, right? So, look, I'm not trying to advertise, but this is the truth. Okay, so your local elite directors are a great source of information and guidance, right? So please go to them. We offer complimentary consulting. Go and talk to somebody. We're not going to charge you for that meeting, and take full advantage of that. And we also offer many different types of college consulting options to fit different needs of different students. And you know, I know Elite has a reputation of being really impeccable when it comes to test preparation, but the true strength of Elite is not in our test prep, it's in our counselors. They have decades and decades of experience. And so they can guide you to, you know, towards the right path. So if you have questions, if you have uncertainties, I would really encourage you to reach out to your local Elite branch directors. And you know, right now, because of the virus, a lot of us are not all that busy, right? So reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to speak to you and answer whatever questions you guys might have. All right, thank you so much for being with me for the last 45 minutes. Right now, I'm gonna try to answer some of your questions that came in. Now, because I was cut off for that brief moment, some of the questions that I think you guys were asking deleted themselves. So if you have questions, please repost, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. Okay, so let's see here. Now, when you register for this webinar, in that registration at the very end, there was a little section where you could have put in questions. So I took some of those questions, and I'm going to answer some of them right now. And then after I'm done answering these, I will go to the live Q&A and answer some of the more related questions there. Okay, so so one of the questions that came in through the registration was you know, oh no, was this. Are they, you know, can you give us any actual examples of serious application mistakes, right? So what are some of the, mistakes that one can be making, right? So just besides, putting in your GPA incorrectly, I hope none of you guys would do that, right? So I think one of the more serious mistakes that gets made a lot of the times is a lot of you guys, when you do your college applications, do not look at the application holistically. So you look at the application in bits and pieces, and you don't try to tie the entire application as one storyline. But I answer A, I'm gonna answer section B and section C, and do not look at the entire application as one thing. So I would really recommend that when you do start looking at these applications, that you start looking at them in a more of a comprehensive manner, and try to answer questions in such a way that they relate to one another, if possible. Another question that came in is, how about out-of-state schools? Will you be covering best practices for applications to out-of-state schools, right? So, besides the UCs, you have, oh, what happened? Oh, okay, so besides the UCs, there are many out-of-state schools that are excellent, right? So, but you have to understand how they are different. So whenever I get students that I work with, whenever I work with students, some of them will say, I want to apply to University of North Carolina. That's one of the schools where I do not like my students applying. So unlike the UC schools, which just open arms welcome any out-of-state students, right? North Carolina is not like that, right? So North Carolina has a state rule in place where 85% of their students must come from that area. So if you're applying from California, your chance of getting to North Carolina is very, very low. So it becomes kind of a waste of an application, and the North Carolina application is not easy. Another thing, so students who are targeting schools like Caltech, MIT, a lot of them will apply early to University of Michigan because University of Michigan is one of the very few schools that has an early application, even though it's a public university. And they'll apply not because they want to go, because they can apply early. And what they don't understand is Michigan aggressively protects their admission yield. So I'll get on regular basis, students who get into MIT, Caltech, they'll get deferred from Michigan, and they're shocked, right? They're shocked. And I tell them, you have no interest in going there. Why did you apply? And like, I just did because I wanted to. You need to understand the idiosyncrasies of different colleges before you apply, and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are when you're applying to out-of-state schools. Okay. Those two questions I really wanted to get to. So I'm gonna go to the Q&A right now. There are 125 questions. I don't know if I can get to all of these. So you know what? Because of the time restraints, I'm gonna answer maybe a handful of these, maybe 4 or 5 of these, and then I'm gonna have to move on. And then if you have any further questions, please, like I said, refer to your local elite directors. They'll be more than happy to answer all these questions for you. One of the questions that came in, how do you know if ED is for you? ED is early decision, right? So one of the benefits of applying early decision to a university is that the admission rates are much higher than if you apply regularly. However, one of the negatives is that if you do get in, you are committed to go. You're not legally bound, but you are committed to go, right? So so there's a give and take there. So how do you know if it's the right thing for you? I personally, when I work with students, I never let students apply ED to a school unless they have visited that school. So I would say that's the #1 condition. You do not want to apply to Johns Hopkins early decision because of their reputation. Oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to go to Hopkins, and you apply early decision, you get in, and then you visit for the very first time and you're like, I hate this place. Right? So one of the conditions for ED that I give to my students is, I would say, visit. So try to visit as many schools as possible. I know that's a very weird thing to say right now with the shutdown. You can't visit anywhere, but under normal circumstances, that's what I would say. Elite also has, if you go to our Facebook and things like that, we have posts up right now where we given a couple of websites where you can actually visit online. So there's school visits online. If you look at the webinar that was held last week by Mr. Randolph, he actually posted, I think, 4 or 5 different web pages where you can do you know, online college visits. So I would recommend that as a, you know, for now, right? Okay, and then are there research opportunities for liberal arts and humanities majors? That's a very, very good question, right? So I want to be poli-sci. I want to be a creative writing major. So unlike my, you know, classmates who are bioengineering majors who have many, many options, for me, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of different opportunities. That's the truth on the surface. Okay, so there are other opportunities available for students who are interested in liberal arts and humanities. It's just that they're not as visible. Once again, I would recommend that you go talk to a, you know, local branch director, and all these directors will be able to give you different options available for you for the area of study that you're interested in. Okay, let me see. Let me see here. Oh, these are all very interesting questions. Let me see. Okay, so this is a really good question. I was going to answer this later on, but might as well get to it now. Due to this pandemic, extracurriculars are interrupted throughout the year, particularly during the summer. Could that be included in the personal statement? I wouldn't write about it. What I would do is I would try to do things during the summer. Just because it's interrupted doesn't mean that there aren't other options. So I'm going to end the webinar here, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of you. There's 175 Q&A questions. I can't get to all of those. Once again, please refer to your local elite branches if you have specific questions you want answered. But just to kind of jump into that question. So the webinar series that we're having will be held every week. So the topic of the webinar series that we're going to be having next week is going to be what type of extracurricular activities are available in this time of COVID-19. You'll be surprised. There are still a lot of different things that you can do. I don't know if you guys are aware, you know, there is an entire, this entity came together way before this virus, but there's actually professors that offer internships during the summer, but the internship is completely online. And this program's been going on for years, right? So this summer, if you got into, let's say, an internship for biochemistry and that's canceled, what do you do? Well, there's options. So the webinar next week is going to cover that. So please join us if you're interested in that next week. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. We're in the process of putting that together right now. I'm trying to gather information from different areas to make sure that particular presentation will be robust and would be worth kind of attending, if you will, right? So, okay, all right. Okay, all right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a busy Saturday. I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you're busy. You're probably stuck at home like I am all the time, but all right. Well, thank you. That's all the time that we have for today's webinar. But as I mentioned earlier, if I wasn't able to get to your questions today, please contact your local elite branch directors and counselors. They'll be more than happy to answer your questions. You can find contact information at eliteprep.com. And if you're looking for some help, for anything, we offer test prep, tutoring, college consulting services online. If you have questions about SATs, ACTs, AP prep, just go to eliteprep.com, and at the top of the webpage, there's a yellow link that says learn more about elite online programs. Fill out the form and somebody will get in touch with you, okay? Once again, thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions, please refer to your elite directors. And I look forward to seeing all of you guys soon. Thank you.